Ever since our last S24 Ultra video back in October, we've had a ton more leaks. From an actual hands-on look to some major AI features, the S24 is looking like one of the biggest upgrades yet. Oh, and by the way, if you like the wallpaper that we have in our concept, it's from our own app, Wallpapers, where we just dropped 2 new packs, Stormy Swirls and Pastel Pastures. Okay, so the first new leak, which is also the biggest one, comes from Twitter user David Martin. And he shared what seems to be actual photos of the S24 Ultra. And I've looked at these photos quite extensively, and I am quite convinced that these photos are not of a dummy unit, which is usually what we see around this time of the year, but instead they are of a functional S24 Ultra unit. Why am I saying this? Well, on dummy units, the camera lenses on the back are usually all identical, as that's just cheaper to manufacture, and it doesn't make a lot of sense for them to have accurate camera lenses, as it's just the camera module sizes that matters for case manufacturer. Which is who the dummy units are made for in the first place. In these photos from David, the camera lenses are all unique. We can see the ultra-wide being smaller than the main, and then the telephoto having that iconic periscope lens look. Compare this to past dummy units, and the differences are just night and day. Then the color of this unit is gray, which is also one of the leaked colors that Russ Young reported on back in October. However, the biggest takeaway that these photos are likely genuine comes from this second photo, where we can see the screen showing the always-on display, aka the phone is powered on. But this is something that you never see with dummy units, as they're literally just a shell with no components inside at all. So now that we've determined that these photos are very likely real, what do we learn from them? Well, we learned that the concepts and the previous leaks were all correct. The S24 Ultra does indeed seem to have an almost entirely flat display, which does line up with Samsung's trend of making their displays flatter and flatter almost every single year. Not only that, but the frame is also much flatter now and more similar to the already flatter frame that we've had on the non-S23 Ultra models. All in all, I do think that it's got a very nice look. I also like how the back glass is now flat too, so you get this more visible separation between the back and the frame as opposed to the curved back on the S23 Ultra. However, I'm a bit worried that these changes will make the S24 Ultra less comfortable to hold than the S23 Ultra was. After all, the S23 Ultra was already a big phone, and the only reason why it was much more comfortable to use than, let's say, an iPhone 14 Pro Max at that time was because it had a more rounded frame, which made it far more comfortable than the 14 Pro Max's flatter frame. We all know that Apple fixed this with the iPhone 15 Pro Max by making its frame more rounded towards the edges, and Apple also made the entire phone narrower. So we'll have to wait and see if the S24 Ultra gets a comfort downgrade or not. And before moving to the next big S24 Ultra leak, I want to give a shout out to our sponsor, NordPass. Running a video production company is more than just creating content, as we also need time to keep our business running optimally and safe. In fact, did you know that 64% of organizations have their productivity impacted by basic access issues? NordPass helps me eliminate this by providing a secure service to access all of my data in one place. NordPass also generates super strong passwords, and their data breach scanner instantly alerts me if any of my accounts are compromised. Get a 3-month business trial by using code ZOT at nordpass.com/ZOT. And now, back to the video. Okay, so the second big new leak is when it comes to the bezels. Ice Universe posted this image of what appears to be S24 lineup screen protectors. And we can tell that they're screen protectors as they do have this peeling lip at the top. Now, the bezels do look incredibly thin here on all 3 models, especially on the S24 Plus. However, these screen protectors will go on top of the actual displays, so there will be a bit of an extra bezel here that will be visible. Essentially, the actual bezels would be quite a bit thicker than what they appear to be in this leak. If we take a look at our concept, which was based on actual dimension leaks, we can get a pretty good idea of the thickness of the S24 Ultra's bezels. And in fact, they do look to be quite thick, even thicker than the S23 Ultras. Which does make sense, as the S23 Ultra's bezels did curve in, giving you the illusion that they were thinner than they actually were. Well, that illusion is now gone with the flat display. And in an earlier leak from August, Ice Universe did post an image of how the bezels of the S24 Ultra would compare to the iPhone 15 Pro Max and the Xiaomi 14. And as you can see, the S24 Ultra does indeed have the thickest bezels here. I do still believe that the Note 10 Plus was Samsung's best looking phone in recent years, with some fairly thin bezels and also a significant curve that made them almost invisible. Aside from this, the codename of the S24 Ultra has also been leaked. This has been reported by both Evan Blass and Ice Universe, and it seems to be Eureka. Now, you've all heard this phrase probably countless times before, but did you guys know that it actually comes from ancient Greek? The story is that Archimedes exclaimed Eureka, which in ancient Greek means I found it, when he stepped into a bath and noticed the volume of the water rising. Hence, he figured out water displacement, and the idea that the volume of the water displaced will always be equal to the volume of the object placed. Hence, he was able to use this to accurately calculate the volume of different objects. It's definitely an interesting story, and the main takeaway here is that Samsung is attributing the S24 Ultra to a big discovery that they've made. But okay, what would this discovery actually be? And I have a feeling that this will be AI. You see, everyone is talking about AI today, from large language models like ChatGPT, Google Bard, to advanced generative AI software like Midjourney, Stable Diffusion, and more. AI isn't the future, it is the present. And a ton of big apps like Microsoft Word, Google Docs, Photoshop, Illustrator, and a ton more are already integrating AI to some extent. Laptop chips have already started adding neural engines that specialize in AI tasks, and smartphone chips have had neural engines for a few years now too, like the Apple A17 Pro, the Snapdragon 8 Gen 2, and more. But with the introduction of the Snapdragon 8 Gen 3, which is what the S24 Ultra will feature, AI processing will be taken to the next level. Back in October, I've had the opportunity to go to the Snapdragon Summit, where I've not only seen the launch event in person, but I also got to play with the 8 Gen 3 for a bit. And the most surprising thing to me is that it is capable of processing large language models and generative AI directly on the chip itself, rather than requiring an internet connection and doing that on external servers. Like, I saw it with my own eyes how a Snapdragon 8 Gen 3 phone was able to generate an image using Stable Diffusion in less than 1 second. And doing something similar on an iPhone would roughly take about 40 seconds. Not only that, but I also saw instances of large language models running directly on the Snapdragon 8 Gen 3. I mean, sure, they weren't at the level of ChatGPT, but they were far more advanced than Google Assistant. And I do have a strong belief that AI will play a big role in the S24 Ultra. Whether that would be a heavily upgraded gallery app that allows us to extend photos by generating missing detail, something that I also saw myself working really well on a Snapdragon 8 Gen 3 device, or a much more improved version of Bixby that we can chat with and ask it to do advanced tasks. Yeah, AI will definitely play a big role in the S24 Ultra. And this isn't just me saying this based on my experience with the 8 Gen 3 and seeing what it is capable of, but it turns out that Samsung has even trademarked the phrase AI phone recently. And not only that, but Ice Universe reported back in October, so even before the Snapdragon Summit, that the S24 Ultra will be Samsung's biggest AI update in history, with a brand new AI, much more powerful than Bixby, and a ton of AI features. I'm genuinely very excited for this, as I got to see all this potential firsthand, and there are a ton of things that Samsung could give us, and I cannot wait to see all of those on the S24 Ultra. As for the standard S24s, I did mention in our previous video that Samsung will switch back to Exynos in Europe, which means that we might see this weird disconnect between Snapdragon and Exynos variants, where Snapdragon models will get AI advancements, whereas Exynos models will likely not get them, or if they do, their performance could be heavily limited. Yeah, do remember that this will only apply to the standard models and not the S24 Ultra, which will have the 8 Gen 3 everywhere. Feel free to subscribe for more S24 Ultra updates if you have enjoyed this video. I'm Daniel, this has been Zone of Tech, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Zone of Tech, signing out. Cheers.